Back to another episode of Rooftop Psychology, where we take your unconscious mind out of cruise control, throw the conscious mind into overdrive. Let's go ahead and kick off this right away here. We're going to talk today about interest versus values, and I'm going to relate it into relationships, more specific into sort of marriage or your significant partner. So, I always like to start off with the definitions to make sure we're kind of on the same page of understanding. Your interests are something that you are literally interested in. So it could be sports, you could go hang out at a certain place, you could be involved in a certain club, all those sorts of aspects where you go out, you interject yourself into society. It could be done at home as well, as far as interest, sort of the idea of a hobby, and you interject yourself. So, I mean, your interest could be simply going to the gym 5 days a week, or your hobby could be at home doing some sort of project, woodworking. Any of those sorts of things would be something that you're interested in, right? Now, values. I'm going to give you here the definition of values. We're going to start breaking this thing down. So values, by definition, are basic and fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate attitudes or actions. All right, so me and my wife, obviously, we've been married here for quite a while. We have a couple of kids. One of the biggest astounding things that we have found in having dinner conversations, whether it's in our home, their home, or out in public, is the fact that very, very few relationships, whether they are young kind of breeding relationships or a few years into marriage, or marriages that have actually gone through, let's say, 15 years of having kids, fundamentally they have not broke down into the values conversation. And by what I mean by that is values such as in the kind of marriage you want to base your decisions on. So these can be questions like, do you want kids or do you not want kids? What about retirement? Do we want to invest every month in retirement? Do you have retirement? Should we put savings aside to retire with? Invest. Questions when you start to get kids like, should we put them in public school? Should we homeschool them? Should we private school them? Should we boarding school them? These are sort of questions that continue to fall out of the question of, well, how do we want to raise our kids, right? Do you want to raise your kids in a church environment? Do you want to raise your kids out of the church environment with kind of a spiritual upbringing, or no spiritual actuation whatsoever, sort of the agnostic or atheist viewpoint? These are serious questions, especially when you go further down the path when you decide you're going to actually have kids. You need to have these conversations to know, where do we both stand on this, and are we going to be compatible down the road, right? Other ones are vacations. Some people are just homebodies. They don't really care to travel the world. You know, they're pretty happy staying in the state they're particularly in, or some people really just enjoy the city they're in. They don't even really go outside their own city. Other people really want to venture out, see the globe, see other cultures. That's a big hang up. If you have one individual who wants to basically stay home and enjoys just the home life, and one person who's busting at the seams to get out there and see what the rest of the world has to offer as far as cultures, cuisines, all that sort of stuff, you're going to have conflict. There is going to be conflict where unintended arguments are going to come up consistently throughout your marriage, not just once and one and done. Another one, kind of looking at the country versus the city life. Do you want to live out in the country? Do you want to live in the city? Another one is animals, right? You have this big debate between, are you a dog person, are you a cat person, right? I mean, if you're a man and you want to particularly have a dog, but your spouse is allergic to dogs, you should probably have that conversation. That's a conversation you should be having and go, okay, well, I'm fine with not having a dog ever, and actually come to grips with saying, yes, I'm actually okay with that, and actually mean it. Not just simply say it to suffice the fact that you're going to try and, I'll work in the dog thing in a few years. No, that's something that should be addressed. So the conversations that come up in that, they need to be had. And yes, they are tough conversations, but they are the foundation of who you are. And the foundation of who you are will vary and change and amalgamate to different particular things. But at the end of the day, your values, your morals, your beliefs, they're pretty foundational. You know, you're not going to far stray from it. For instance, if you're someone who's that sort of devout Christian, you're really going to swing so far to not believe in anything? I don't know. That's a really big swing, right? So if you're doing that for a particular individual, you need to actually be honest with the fact that, will I make that swing? Can I believe it? Is it going to make me happy? All these sorts of things. So your other things like your interests, right? Your sports. So you can meet somebody And let's say, yeah, I'm a person who likes to go out on Friday night to that one outdoor volleyball court and I play beach volleyball with all the other people at the restaurant, right? Or the bar. And that's where you can meet your particular spouse, right? So that's your interest. That's what got you cued into that particular individual. And usually our interests start off by the look, right? You're physically attracted to somebody before you actually get to know their name or meet them. That's what we see first. That's representation. So that's an interest, right? You're interested in the way they see, how they make you feel, just by their appearance. Now we go into the beach volleyball. You start hanging out because, well, here, I'll see you here next Friday night. Next thing that rolls into maybe a weekday date, and the relationship evolves. This is pretty much how every relationship starts, is on some sort of basic common interest, right? Going to the gym, going to the movies, maybe you're a mountain biker, maybe you got a boat and you're on the lake sports, right? You wakeboard, you tube, maybe you're living somewhere where there's winter sports. You ski, and you end up meeting somebody on the chairlift with you on your ride up. There's your common interest, right? So getting on that same page of, hey, you do something that I enjoy, I'm doing something you enjoy. You have some sort of a foundational basis to actually start a relationship, and the spark is there. But when you go through, it is so vitally important to have the tough conversations. Do you want to have kids or don't you want to have kids? I can't believe to tell you how many married couples, not just dating, but married couples we've come across, where now they're starting to struggle a few years into their marriage because now one of them wants to have kids and one of them doesn't. And it's not that they are kind of tripping over it now and one of them's not ready. It's that they never actually had the conversation in the first place. It absolutely blows my mind about, well, what did you talk about? How have you gone this far with this many years without having a conflict on certain vital, foundational principle value questions? It's something that has boggled me and my wife's mind for quite some time. But in order to set yourself up to be happy as an individual and happy as a joint with your partner, these are tough conversations that you're going to have to endure, and it's better to get them out of the way as soon as possible. Not that you're necessarily going to agree, but at least get the conversation going. There's no point in having a relationship built for 3, 4, 5 years. Now you decide, well, maybe we'll go ahead and get married. Now let's have a conversation about kids. And you find out you're incompatible because one of you wants kids or one of you does not want kids. That's a whole lot of investment you've just put into a particular person that now you're faced with the decision. Do I withdraw from this relationship and lose all of the input, the time that I've spent? Or do I sacrifice not having kids? Do I sacrifice not living in the country or living in the city? All these sorts of questions that you start to sacrifice. Do I going to give up having a dog in my particular life? So going down that path, you always hear the thing about, well, it's amazing how many couples fall out of love with each other and their interest revolves around kids. So they have kids, 20 years go by, their kids move out of the house, they wake up, next thing is they don't even recognize the person that they're laying beside in bed or the person that they're going in the vehicle with. Well, of course not, because the communication's been lost. And what you were interested in always changes. Just because you were young and we all looked good and we were 20, 25 years old, we played that beach volleyball, eventually you're going to stop playing beach volleyball. Now, you may interest into something particularly else, but that first spark of interest that got you with your particular partner, it's more than likely going to change. And because it's more than likely going to change, you need to have something else to actually base your relationship foundation on. And the thing that you can do that on is values, right? It's the things that you core absolutely believe in, how you would raise your kids, how you would give advice. Those are things that you need to have these conversations about so you don't wind up 10 years married, find out your interests have changed far enough, or one of you have particularly gained an interest that your other one is not interested in. And next thing is you're living two completely separate lives living in the same house. I look at this situation with many couples that we've kind of gone through, sat down at dinner tables with. It has astounded me at how many have ended in divorce. With two individuals who, they love each other, two individuals that care about each other, but they're just not interested in each other anymore. And that's because they based their entire foundation on the interest and the common practice that was there, as opposed to the values that when you're all old and gray and we're sitting on our back deck, or the front porch, and you watch your grandkids play, the way you raised your kids together with certain values and belief systems passed down to you also your grandkids. Your grandkids may not have certain interests that you have in, but the reflection of the values that you put forth as a joint married couple down to your kids will continue to pass down to your grandkids, and the values and the belief system will pass on for generations. That's a super, super important thing to think about on how you want to conduct yourself, how you want to conduct yourself with your particular partner, and how you'd want to raise kids, or at least be a great aunt and uncle to your nephew or niece. These are values you can live on, you can live by, and you can really come to terms with people on. This is a foundational way to live our life how we want to live our life. And that way you won't fall out of love with your spouse 20 years down the road. And now the only thing that's interesting to you is getting divorced because you've lost that distance and time to go back and all the unhappiness that happens because of it. Now, I don't say this lightly, like you just need to sit down with your spouse tonight and say, hey, by the way, we need to know kids, schools, this, vacations, retirement. That's not what I'm telling you to do. But I am telling you to actually have an honest conversation with yourself and an honest conversation with your spouse so you can progress down a path that you're both happy living the rest of your lives to be, particularly raise kids, and you don't fall out of interest love with each other. You fall more in love with value love. That's it for today. Hopefully we kicked your brain into the conscious overdrive. We'll see you on the next one.